morning, and welcome to Morning Movie News, where, that's such a good episode today. I'm so excited to talk about these topics with you. We have not only some great stories, but a giveaway from Dolby Atmos. But actually, I want to start out with the new Bernie Sanders political ad. And you might be thinking, what does this have to do with Morning Movie News, Grace? But the episode's a little late today. I'm getting back on track after traveling and pulling that all-nighter for the DC special. So I wanted to check Twitter before I filmed today to make sure there weren't any breaking stories that I was missing. And I saw Simon and Garfunkel trending, and like everybody, I was like, they didn't die, did they? Did something horrible happen to Simon and Garfunkel? But luckily, it's just that Bernie Sanders used their song America in his new ad campaign, ad. So I decided to look at it because everyone was talking about it, and I was blown away by how good it is. So if you watch this show, you're interested in the business side of Hollywood, the marketing, and a lot of times that's the marketing. And political campaigns are marketing. They're marketing for a politician. And so it's a fascinating field of study. Actually, in school, I studied the whole evolution of political campaigns, the introduction of television and how that favored Kennedy over Nixon. That's like a huge, crucial turning point in campaign history, political campaign history. So the whole thing's actually really fascinating. And of course, there are a couple of ads over the years that have stood out. For instance, the single-tier Native American with, nuclear war, the threat of nuclear war, all that stuff. And the Bernie Sanders ad is like that good. So politics aside, I think that everybody should look at it because it's just a really good ad. And it's not only a good ad, but it's a good way to show that positivity can be just as powerful as fear-mongering, right? Although recently I read a comic book, the new Captain America, Sam Wilson, which is very political, by the way, and they had a villain have a monologue. He was monologuing, and he talked about how fear really motivates people, and he had some really good examples. So I was like, not only was that interesting, but thanks, comic books, for proving that sometimes you can be very intellectual as well. I appreciate it. This new Captain America, Sam Wilson Captain America comic is very good, but it's also highly political, which is why some people don't like it and why they debated it on Fox News. But anyway, let's get into today's episode, but I do urge you to watch that campaign ad just purely from an analytical sense because it's fascinating and it's just good. Everybody appreciates a good montage to a song. So it's in the video description, but what else is in the video description is a video from Dolby Atmos talking about what they did to enhance the Everest experience. And speaking of Everest, they have given me 2 copies of the Blu-ray to give away to you. Now, Everest was actually a really good movie. I think that one of the great things about the movie is how they did such a good job of replicating the experience of climbing Everest. And so Dolby Atmos, of course, contributed to that with creating the soundscape of the movie. So the link to that video is also in the video description. But if you would like to get a copy of Everest, let's say what you need to do is, I like to try and make this fun and clever, not only to enter, but to read everybody's tweets. So by the end of the day, Sunday, you have to tweet me at Grace Randolph. Here are the rules. You have to tweet me at Grace Randolph, and then you have to include the hashtags Dolby Atmos and Everest. And then please tell me why you would climb Everest. Okay? So those are the rules, and I will pick the best 2 to be announced on Morning Movie News on Monday, and you guys will get Blu-ray copies of Everest. Again, a really good film. I really enjoyed it. Great performances, true story, and so I think that it's definitely, sometimes you guys don't want the video, or it's like, why would I want that movie? But I think for the most part, we get really good giveaways from Dolby Atmos, and they're so nice to always think of us. But this is one of the really good ones. And so, also, I know a lot of you didn't see Everest, so this is your chance. Poor Everest. It did really well in its IMAX release. But I think it's something you can enjoy watching at home as well, especially when you can appreciate the sound. And of course, the Blu-ray will be mixed in Dolby Atmos technology. So again, you have till the end of the day Sunday to tweet me your entry, and I will be reminding you. All right, so let's get on to the 3 stories of the day. That Everest giveaway took the place of the viewer question, but viewer question will return tomorrow. But anyway, the first story, made quite a headline yesterday when Disney announced they were delaying Star Wars Episode 8 until December 2017. It was supposed to come out in summer 2017, but then they gave the Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Men Tell No Tales. They took that release date that was originally going to go to Star Wars Episode 8. Now, They said one of the reasons was that pre-production ran a little long with Rian Johnson. Although we know they've shot a few things, on Michael Skellig Island recently. I guess to get out ahead, maybe to deal with people's schedules. Who knows? But apparently they haven't really started filming the movie in earnest, and so they want to make sure they have enough time to complete it. Also, as everyone's pointed out, I think they're like, whew, before episode 7 came out, Bob Iger was like really trying to manage expectations, and he was like, December movies don't perform the way that summer movies do. But now you have both Avatar and Star Wars performing so well in that time slot. So Disney was like, you know what, we're going to lock that down. So we've discussed this before. I think a number of sites have discussed, the possibility of Disney, Star Wars owning December, basically taking what The Hobbit left vacant. And I think that's very smart. So it looks like, while The Hobbit for years owned the holiday season, now Star Wars will. Now, one of the reasons The Hobbit liked having that was because, and Harry Potter came into that a little bit as well with December releases, but they would do a mix of summer and winter. Although I have to say, Warner Brothers, therefore, because they own both those franchises, Harry Potter and The Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, they just lost it to Disney. So I'd be like, Warner Brothers and Disney are a particularly, competitive relationship. But anyway, I think it's very smart for Star Wars to take this. I think that it makes sense, and as many people are saying, let Marvel have. Marvel will take the summer, and also, of course, November. November is becoming a big Marvel release date time, and then Star Wars will take December. And it, apparently, as we can see, have no problems at the box office. But that's what I was saying was that The Lord of the Rings did very well with Oscars, but Star Wars is going to have to up its game a little bit, in terms of its artistry, if it wants to be an awards contender as well. But it has the time slot to be, so we'll see. Now, a lot of people, I think rightly so, pointed out that Avatar 2 is set to come out a week later, in December 2017. Basically, Star Wars, I think, December 15th, and then literally 10 days later on the 25th for Christmas, Avatar 2 is supposed to be released. Now, that's quite the matchup. However, Avatar 2 has moved release dates so many times, I think a studio would be crazy, any studio would be crazy to, try and make allowances for Avatar. Because I'd be like, Avatar hasn't started filming either, and is it really going to make that release date? Let's see. It's missed so many release dates at this point. Who knows? I mean, what will be finished first, Avatar 2 or the theme park section of Disney's Animal Kingdom that they're building to promote the film, right? I mean, it's just taking forever. He wants to make like 2, 3, and 4 at the same time, but let's just make one, James. Let's just make one. Maybe he's getting a little nervous because people are getting so close to his $2 billion club. We'll see if Star Wars joins. I think that Star Wars will be, by the way, I think there's a very strong chance it'll be the first film in the United States, not counting for inflation, to make $1 billion domestically. I think that probably will be its really big claim to fame, and I think it'll probably surpass Titanic, but I don't think it's going to beat out Avatar. Although Avatar has so many haters that I think it'll be curious to see if it can, do as well the second time around. He's going to have to do some big technological advancement. Maybe that's what he's waiting on. But I think it's great. I think it's a very smart move for Star Wars. I think that December should be there. They should just, every December for Christmas, and one of you tweeted me and said, that's okay with me for a family tradition, that there is a Star Wars movie that comes out for the holidays. I think that's a great idea. They can own that, and right now nobody else really does, right? Hunger Games is over, so that's wide open for them to lay claim to it. I mean, it kind of sucks for all the other studios, but so it looks like, every year where studios give Star Wars the wide berth that they gave The Force Awakens. Remember how dismal September, October, and November were, basically, because everyone was just waiting for Star Wars? They can't do that every year, so it'll be interesting to see how this situation evolves. But anyway, so that was the big headline, and some people were like, I have to wait an extra 7 months, but it's not, in the big scope of things, it's not really, I think, that big a deal, and it's just a smart move. All right, so the second story of the day, I couldn't make a second video about, its own video about this. I apologize. I was traveling when the Oscar nominations came out. In an effort to not be traveling when the actual Oscars aired, I ended up, unwittingly scheduling my flight for when they announced the nominations. I was like, damn it. But anyway, I wanted to address the Oscars Whiteout situation. USA Today had a big headline saying Whiteout 2, because of course last year people were very upset about the complete lack of color in the major categories. In the director category you have Alejandro Inarritu, but still, not really any diversity there. But I think that this time around, the powers that be are ready, because of Whiteout 1, to make some great comments and to be organized to really make, I think, a difference for Whiteout 2. That's what everyone's calling it, Whiteout 2. And I think that's also, like, to brand it and to have that kind of, like, really good hashtag, I think is very smart. So basically, this isn't going away. Also, I feel very bad for Chris Rock, who, of course, now is forced to host this show. And, we really, in the light of Jada Pinkett Smith's comments about, we're asked to entertain and to make the show fun and to show up and be there, but that no one honors our work that we do or, seems to value what we contribute to the industry. It's a little bit, it brings back, minstrel shows and the like, and so that's kind of the position that Chris Rock has been put in. I'm sure he will be talking about it in his monologue because he has no choice. He wants to have any integrity whatsoever. So it puts him in a very awkward position. And of course, the head of the Academy also happens to be African American. And so she has commented on it. But at the end of the day, it's still a huge problem. Now, in the news this morning, Will Smith was on Good Morning America talking to Robin Roberts, who happens to be the African-American co-host of that show, and he said, I'm not attending the Oscars because I really, someone has to take a stand. And I think that's right. I think a boycott would make sense. And I'm curious to see if the boycott will not only be from talent, but also people tuning in. Will people boycott the Oscars and really hurt the ratings? Because, Al Sharpton also had some very smart things to say about this. He said, that's where you're really going to make a difference. Now, but what's the answer to this, right? I mean, I was talking to a friend about this, and I was like, well, the only real thing you could do, which would be really appalling and tragic, would to create a non-white category. Like, we talk about whether or not women should have their own category, right? But clearly it's to make sure women get nominated, because look how hard it is sometimes to fill the female categories. And I think women have a similar problem to what, non-white actors have to go through. I think it's difficult. The industry's still evolving. It's getting better, but it's still evolving. But what would you have, like a non-white category? And then, what would that say about Hollywood? I think it would be horrible. But Al Sharpton, one of the things that he said that I really liked was that he said, we talked to people after what happened last time. We had a lot of meetings in Hollywood. And Al Sharpton said, I pointed out that in, development offices and production offices, outside of like producers like Will Packer, who has his own production company, there are no people of color in the studio system who are deciding what movies get made. And I thought that was a really smart comment. I thought that was very telling. I think that also will change. But, the best thing and this is a very difficult conversation, because I was just going to say, well, the best thing to do is to make great movies, right? But look what happened to Ava DuVernay with Selma. That movie was largely, I think to some degree, didn't get the attention it should have. It did win some Oscars and was nominated in some categories, but still, I would say Ava DuVernay, just make a movie. I've been saying that. But, look at the movies that were made this year, and they were not recognized. I think, how can you nominate Sylvester Stallone for Creed and not have any recognition? Like, it's kind of looks bad that you picked only the one white guy in the movie to give any recognition to. Not that he doesn't deserve it, and I think the directing category is very crowded, but I think Ryan Coogler should have gotten a writing nomination, because he he worked with Stallone to create that. So how do you not recognize his contribution to it? I mean, that's and he's the one who came up with the idea to even bring this character back. This is something he had to talk Sylvester Stallone into doing. So not to give him any recognition, I think, is ridiculous. And then also Straight Outta Compton, I know it doesn't seem like an Oscar film, but by the way, I'm going to review Brooklyn in the next couple of days. I've caught up on a lot of movies when I was traveling. Brooklyn is like the whitest movie possible. And I know some people really enjoyed it, so I want to be respectful of that, but it's not nearly as good a film as Compton. So it's frustrating for me to see Brooklyn get all these nominations and be like, that just seems like kind of like a TV movie to me, like an American Girl movie for adults. But then Straight Outta Compton, which chronicles one of the most important things to happen to the music industry and pop culture ever, just watch the ending of that movie and see how the repercussions of the success of that group. It's just like, it's ridiculous. So that really should have gotten a Best Picture nomination at the very least. So it's frustrating. It's a difficult situation. I'm not quite sure what the answer to it is. I think, and also you just can't keep making slave movies. I mean, I think that there are exciting things happening. That one instance, while of course very important, shouldn't define an entire demographic, right? I think there's like slave movies and Holocaust movies are like, Oscar-friendly categories. But I think that, I think it speaks poorly of the Academy voters that they only think of these demographics in those terms, right? I mean, it's like, come on, you guys. You have to be more open-minded as to what's important. So I think it's a shame, but the only way I'd be very curious to see what happens with the Boycott and if that's effective. So we'll see. All right, so the third story of the day actually is a very fascinating story about Netflix and its ever-changing position in the movie business. Now, there was a really interesting article in The Hollywood Reporter, I will put a link to it in the video description, talking about Netflix at Sundance and how they're annoying a lot of studios because of the way they're being very aggressive with acquiring movies not for theatrical release, but only for SVOD. This is a new term. I had not heard of it. I had to look it up. It's called subscription video on demand. So I guess in the ever-evolving digital marketplace, this is becoming a big part of the business. Now, what I think is interesting right off the bat is that Netflix has backed away from its theatrical day-and-date distribution model where it's available on Netflix and in theaters the same day. I think after Beasts of No Nation, they're like, that didn't work. So they made two really big deals already at Sundance before the movies even aired, which annoyed a lot of studios as well. But interestingly, only for SVOD rights. They did not go for theatrical release or, say we want to do a day-and-date co-release and set that up as well. So they seem to have moved away from that model. So that's very interesting. Netflix is, I don't know if you saw that story about NBC trying to say that the ratings for the Netflix shows were weak, and those Netflix successes like Jessica Jones and Master of None would be considered failures on NBC by network standards. I thought that was really interesting. And then Netflix was like, these numbers are wrong, they're stupid, and it was like really, Netflix. If Netflix really wants to make that discussion go away, release your viewership numbers. But they're not going to do that because obviously they're not that impressive. I mean, if they don't release their viewership numbers, it's because they don't look so good. That's the only reason they could not be releasing them. But anyway, so Netflix, and also right here, the day-and-date distribution model didn't work as well. But so they paid $7 million for Paul Rudd's The Fundamentals of Caring. I'll be curious to see what happens to Paul Rudd's career post Ant-Man. And then also $5 million for Ellen Page's Tallulah. Those are supposed to be two of the hottest movies at Sundance, and Netflix has already sewed up the SVOD rights. Now, why is this a problem for the studios? Well, you learn something new every day. The studios, I didn't even know this. The studios have a model where they acquire the theatrical rights to a movie, and then they also get the SVOD rights, which they then sell to someone they have a deal with. So like a studio will have a deal with HBO, Showtime, Stars. And the deal is that they get the SVOD rights to any theatrical release that studio has. And that money offsets the cost of the theatrical acquisition or maybe the marketing of the film theatrically. And so studios rely on that business model to back them up, financially, to shore up their purchases. But they don't have that anymore. They said, now we have to go and say, hey, we acquired the theatrical rights to this movie, but we don't have the SVOD rights, so we're not going to get any money reimbursement there, and also we're kind of leaving our SVOD partners out to dry. So I thought that was fascinating, and to see, and also that these two movies didn't care about that. You would think they'd be nervous about securing a theatrical release if they sold away their SVOD rights. But basically what happened is that Netflix gave them so much money, $7 million again for Paul Rudd's film and $5 million for Ellen Page's. Some people are saying that the Paul Rudd deal behind the scenes is like one of the biggest ever in Sundance history. They just throw so much money in people's faces. They're like, okay, but these movies still don't have a theatrical release secured, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. But anyway, a really fascinating situation, so I hope you enjoyed hearing about it as much as I did. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, and be sure to enter for a copy of Everest by tweeting me along those guidelines. All right, thanks so much for watching. Bye.